Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to this webinar that's brought to you as part of an ongoing series from Polyfuze Graphics Corporation. My name is Marty. I'm the Senior Vice President here at Polyfuze, and I'm delighted to be your host today. So if you've joined us in the past, you know that our goal for these events is to provide education and insight. And today we're going to be talking about the future of asset track and trace and the technology that makes it work. Now, regardless of the role that you play in the industry, we trust that today's webinar is going to be of value to you. To get things started, let me just give a quick summary of what we're going to talk about here in the next 20 to 30 minutes. Our guest today is Souroush, who is the founder and CEO of SystemLoco. Now, following an introduction of Souroush in a few moments, he and I are going to take a little bit of time to talk about the unique value proposition that our individual technologies provide the industry. From there, we're going to take time to dive into a supply chain map, and we're going to talk about some real-world examples as we follow the life of an asset through the supply chain. We're also going to take a couple of minutes to talk about a couple of case studies that are on the Reusable Packaging Association website. But the heart of our discussion today is really going to center around what you should be thinking about when considering track and trace for your organization. Towards the end of the program today, we also want to get to some frequently asked questions, but we also hope to hear from you, members of the audience. So if you have questions, get them ready, put them into the chat, and we promise to get to them towards the end of today's program. Okay, without further delay, I'm going to introduce our guest in just a moment. And in doing so, I want to point out that I have the pleasure of serving with Souroush on RPA's Technology Working Group. Last year at PAC Expo, I also served on a technical discussion panel with Souroush, and I knew then that he'd make a great guest. So welcome, my friend.
Thank you very much, Marty. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Why don't we start off by having you talk a little about SystemLoco and your background?
Sure. So SystemLoco is a technology company. The actual name SystemLoco, when we came up with that about 10 years ago now, it was loco in Latin meant to find. And we were like providing a system to be able to find things. And in Spanish, it meant crazy. So we sort of felt that sort of suited us quite well. But it also, what we also deal with is the supply chain. That's where our focus is, in providing technology for helping to manage the supply chain, which in its own right is a crazy system. So a lot of things go wrong. So I think SystemLoco sort of lends itself to that as well. As I said, we're a technology company. What we do is we design and build IoT devices and sensors which are used to instrument, whether it's pallets, trays, totes, or just placed on within a shipment, to be able to monitor the goods that are being transported. And the aim is to try to prevent loss that happens. So trying to look at those leading indicators which sort of say, if this continues, we're going to have a problem. How can we do something now in near real time to prevent a loss from actually happening? So yeah, it's I think this is taken from the website, Maximize Intelligence, but really the key is minimize losses and what affects the bottom line of shippers.
Souroush, you mentioned a little bit ago that you guys just celebrated a milestone, 10 years, is that correct?
Yeah, it's 10 years in September that the company was founded, and yeah, it's grown considerably from that time. I was saying to someone else the other day that we started off where we were building devices within the company, around 200 at that point, that we had to get out for a customer, and we were sort of thinking, oh my God, how are we going to get these out? And now it's probably around 50 to 60,000 every month that wow. we're getting out the door, and those are cellular connected devices now, and the industry is changing, which is exciting, to become more granular labels, working with these hubs as well.
Well, and you've seen a lot of change over last year. We actually have a slide that's going to talk about that. But another thing I wanted to ask is where the offices are based. If people wanted to get in touch with you, where would they find you?
Sure. So we were founded in the UK. We've got 3 offices in the UK. I've actually moved a couple of years ago now to Dallas. So we've got an office here in Dallas and one in Taiwan as well that helps with coordinating manufacturing.
Outstanding. Well, great. Well, Souroush, we do appreciate you joining us. You've got a great amount of information. We've got some stuff to go into. If I could, I'm going to take just a moment to give a quick summary about what we do here at Polyfuze. A lot of the times people ask us, what are we talking about when we're saying monomaterial labeling? And really, when we say that, we're referring to the asset and the label being made of the same thing. Polymer is the material of choice now for manufacturers because of its durability. It's being used by more manufacturers and tooling companies. But unlike traditional labeling methods that are trying to stick to the surface of olefinic materials like polypropylene and polyethylene, Polyfuze literally fuses into the surface of it. It becomes a tattoo for the plastic. Once it's applied, it's going to be there for the life of the asset. It's very durable. It will withstand UV exposure, cleaning with chemicals, chemical exposure. It's important to point out that Polyfuze can be applied with standard hot stamping equipment, but that it's a very reliable and repeatable process, so it's great for scrap reduction. There is no pre-treating required with Polyfuze. That's something that's associated with other traditional labeling methods and usually produces hidden cost. And best of all, because the label and the asset are made of the same thing, monomaterial, they can be recycled together at the end of the life of the asset. And this is a big issue with recyclers, who are normally the ones that have to deal with this at the end of the life of an asset. So Souroush, we were just talking a minute ago about your 10-year. We put this slide in here to just really illustrate that during the last 10 years, the cost of track and trace has really come down. That to me seems to be associated with not just demand, but technology. It seems in the past that track and trace was isolated to just high value assets. Maybe you could talk about that. What have you seen change over the last 10 years with your time with SystemLoco in this regard?
Yeah, we've seen a big change in market demand. I think 10 years ago, we were very focused in sort of higher value goods. A lot of the focus would have been against theft prevention at that point. So trying to make sure that if, something happens, driver rules are not being followed, someone stops at the wrong place, we can identify that and be on alert, and also identifying, for instance, a door opening at the wrong place.
Right.
So it was very much theft prevention. Now it's grown, so that market has grown. Unfortunately, cargo theft has continued to grow as well. But it's meant as well that the cost in the technology is, as you can sort of see here, reduced significantly over time. We're seeing a lot of companies now, which might be in pharmaceuticals, in food and beverage, all sort of wanting their supply chains to be more data driven. Yeah. And it doesn't take much in terms of the cost of a shipment now, whether it's $100,000 or expensive ones to be over $1 million. One of those goes wrong, that pays for the deployment of the solution to be able to make sure that you've got that ability to be data driven and fix issues before they can result in waste and spoilage.
Yeah, and we're going to dive into that. In preparation for this event, you and I talked briefly. We were discussing the other day that track and trace, it seems like it initially starts with theft and security in mind, but then we're really talking about other things like the care of the goods, maybe a customer service issue. I'll have some examples I'll talk about there in a minute, and then just operational efficiency. Do you want to expand on that at all a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got, like we said, theft is one aspect that has always been there, but then you've got compliance. So whether that is for the actual FDA compliance for drugs and pharmaceuticals, whether it's food and FSMA. So you've got those compliance standards which require you to be able to have visibility within the transit. And that's led to it sort of expanding beyond just the in-transit leg as well. So people, when they're looking at track and trace, now it's not just what happens when it reaches the vehicle and until it arrives at the destination. It can be, the pallets being prepared in the factory, the right goods the right boxes being placed on that pallet, is the right pallet being put into the right truck, is the truck at the right temperature, all of these sort of aspects, which we're going to get into, which has sort of expanded, if you like, the market demand for technology. And then because that market demand is grown, the cost and the tools to be able to provide valuable services comes down, and this is what's creating what we can see as an exponential market growth.
Well, let's continue that thought as we move to the next slide, because this slide I want to call attention to because it is a screenshot from the Reusable Packaging Association's website. It's a great resource for people to come to. This particular section of the site includes some case studies that we're going to talk about in a minute, one from SystemLoco, one from Polyfuze. But before we get into that, there's a quote that I think is really important to point out that's on this website. And the quote is, "It's critical to start with the use case that you're trying to solve before selecting technology-enabled solution." Let's talk about why we think that's important. In your experience, Souroush, why is it important to start with that use case before selecting the technology-enabled solution?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously like we said before, the supply chain is complex. There's a lot of parts to it. So whether that is you're trying to identify where things go wrong, what the problems are, what problems you're trying to solve is quite key. And then also trying to understand your existing processes. So what is it that you currently do? And I think sometimes we've seen technology being introduced where it's radically changing the process and the structure of what's there already. So starting off with what do we currently do, where our main pain points are, is I think key. And then trying to look at getting input from stakeholders within the supply chain, because often it's not one person that manages everything. So there'll be one person dealing with the material being loaded, there'll be another one that monitors what happens in transit, there'll be another one that deals with the invoicing when it's delivered, and the reverse logistics, for instance. So understanding that picture and how it applies within your current processes and where the pain points are, I think is a great starting point. And this is why I think this slide is so powerful, because it sort of makes you have to think about, well, what do I do at each of these stages? And what exactly are the challenges that I face at each of these points?
Souroush, one of the things we talked about in our prep work here was an example I gave where I was talking with an operations person, and he really just didn't even know where to begin. He's like, well, I know to use you for the label, but what kind of hardware, what kind of software? So we talked about just this ecosystem of all of us, a lot of which are Reusable Packaging Association members, between pooling companies and manufacturers and software guys like you, hardware companies, label companies like us, and really providing resources to each other. I mean, we do a lot of that here at Polyfuze. We integrate with machine makers, certainly giving referrals to technology people like you. What's your experience with that also, like bringing everything together for somebody who might be lost?
Absolutely. It's changed a lot over the last 10 years. So I think it was very much companies looking at trying to solve every part of the puzzle on their own, to becoming more of a sort of collaborative sort of partner group and ecosystem, as you put it quite well, where you're only effectively as good as your weakest link. So trying to do too much as one company can often mean the whole solution suffers. So for us, we always work with partners. We provide technology, but then we've got partners that will help make sure that they're deployed correctly, the inventory is there ready for it to be used. They've got 24/7 support if they need it for certain things. There'll be people that provide insurance services, monitoring services, all of these capabilities which the end user may require, which would not be SystemLoco's wheelhouse, but we've got a network of partners that are fantastic at doing that.
Outstanding. You mentioned that weakest link thing. I have to jump on that, because if you're on this website and there are those case studies, the Polyfuze case study, for us, it's all about the label. That sometimes is the weakest link, because if you're a buyer that's just focused on initial cost, you really might be surprised to understand the long-term total cost of ownership that's associated with this case study. Because when the label fails, it's really the supply chain that pays the cost, right? You've got the downtime, the time to replace it. There's time to be doing things you could be doing otherwise, maybe customer service issues. So it's really just kind of unacceptable that a few cent sticker can disrupt an entire multi-million-dollar supply chain. So I encourage the people on this webinar who are viewing or listening to check out that case study, because it really does provide some excellent real-world examples. But thanks for mentioning that. And as we were talking about it, I think the RPA really, I think, is a good resource for people to go to. There's a lot of not just good information like this page, but putting it all together between the label maker, the software guys, the hardware, who's going to be making the asset for you, pooling company. think we talked the other day a little bit about system integrators. Experience with that, Souroush, that you want to expand on?
Yeah, I mean, we work with system integrators as well. Again, I think there's system integrators that are basically do a great job. At the end, all of this data needs to be put into either some sort of systems that the client uses, whether that's their ERP systems, their warehouse management systems. And I think this is where we work with partners that are system integrators that deal with that type of integration.
Right. Well, in summary here, this is a great resource. If you do, it's reusables.org. Definitely encourage people to check out the website. Great resources there. Souroush, as we transition off this slide, do you want to touch on the case study that's on there for SystemLoco on this page?
Sure. So we work with quite a lot of industries, and I mean, a lot of it, like we said, is in high value goods, and now it's sort of moving as well to pharmaceutical and food, and we've got partners that provide solutions into those industries. So some of the challenges that we've seen and have been from gaming consoles, which are being transported and pallets tipping over very close to the point of manufacture. So rather than those gaming consoles getting through to the port, then through to the distribution centers in the US, and then through to stores, and then through to the kid's house at Christmas, and then he finds out it doesn't work. Yeah. You've got that ability that within half an hour of the journey where the pallet's tipped over, for it to be returned, for the units to be swapped out, so you don't have those types of issues that then damage the brand. And I think that's one thing that is obviously very important as well. It's not just the cost, although the cost is significant, it's also the brand damage that can go with it if you're giving customers a bad experience because of mishandling or damage that's happened within the supply chain. On a different level, not necessarily as high value goods, but we've had cases where there's food produce that's been transported, and being able to identify that the right pallets are loaded onto the right truck, that they're being stored at the right temperature, and being able to see that, look, this temperature is actually at this level now, but it's going from, for instance, in this case, from Minnesota through to Florida. As it's going to travel down, the outside temperature is going to mean that the reefer is not performing with its current settings. So again, this is how our partners are able to engage and inform the driver, some of which is now being done through AI agents, to be able to get them to pull over, change the settings, confirm those settings have taken place, and effectively save the load. And even when it's prime beef, that could be almost $500,000 per shipment per truck. So it's significant, the savings you can make with what is a very low cost technology that can identify these issues in real time, early enough for you to do something about it.
We both have we have a slide for that, one of our last slides. We'll get into some specific examples, but as we transition, I wanted to mention, I remember when you came back from Manifest, you provided a really good summary to the technology working group. It was excellent. You were looking at it through a different lens. Maybe you could just give us let's use this slide to talk a little bit about some of the technologies that you saw and what's emerging. Sure. AI seems to be the topic of the hour. Do you want to start with that one?
Absolutely. I think AI is everywhere in terms of when we go to these shows and events. Manifest being one of the largest for the supply chain, and everybody is looking at how they can use AI at different levels. So some of this is in terms of interpreting information, looking at how certain carriers perform on certain lanes, what insurance products might work better for us for different sort of applications. So there's lots of different applications for AI, and you can certainly see that at the show. But what AI is, what it actually needs to be able to work is clean data. Yeah. So, and I think, like I said, there's sort of layers to AI. So on the outside, it's sort of making use for business intelligence. But we, as a technology company, use AI in the form of trying to manage the data capabilities of our sensors. Knowing, for instance, at this point, there's a need to be sampling these bits of information and interpreting them in a different way based on context. So being able to have the intelligence effectively not just in the cloud, but being moved down into the sort of physical devices so that we can make sure that we can provide cleaner data into the system.
Yeah, it was about a year ago that I remember hearing a quote from some sales leader, and he was saying that, you know, with AI, if you're not integrating, you're not getting on board, you will be left behind. I think everybody believes that. It sounds like SystemLoco has embraced that as well.
Absolutely, and I think everybody's looking at using AI to, again, save costs, create automation, but it comes down to making sure that you've got the right data on which you can build upon, and I think that's key, and I think sometimes underestimated. If you're feeding in bad data, you're not going to get good answers.
Yeah. Well, you said something the other day that I thought was really good. That you were saying that you felt, for people who might be listening, some of the examples they gave somebody who might be lost, that it's really important to take one step at a time, because you might be creating more problems than you can solve. You want to expand on that?
Yeah, I think sometimes there's a misconception that it's quite easy to monitor things within your supply chain. There's quite a lot to it, and there is within an industry where the issues really happen infrequently, a fraction of the time. Most of your shipments will probably be fine, but it's that 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 even, that could go wrong, which would have a catastrophic impact to both your brand and huge amounts of losses. So making sure that any solution, any technology you provide is super reliable is key, is paramount. Yeah. So, and that includes working with experienced partners. That's why we work with a partner network as well, that we can introduce, that would be able to say, yeah, we do the same sort of challenges for lots of different people. Things such as making sure that you've got the association with the bill of lading with the device, making sure that the device is operational before it's set off with the load, making sure that the right interventions are taken and the right people are contacted to be able to make the savings. All of that is important to be able to get the benefits. Yeah. And I think sometimes there's a misconception that, oh, you can just take one of our devices, throw it in the back of a truck, and it's done. It's not quite that easy, not yet anyway.
Well, I think that goes back to taking it one step at a time, really thinking it through. You know, that quote from the very beginning, it's really important to start with a use case. Even though it's not listed on here, I mean, I would include polymer fusion as one of those technologies. It's really becoming much more known in reusable packaging and other industries. I always like to use the example of when I was a kid, all of the garbage cans that we had were made of steel. The lawnmower parts were mostly made of metal, aluminum, and steel, car parts. So polymer has really replaced steel and aluminum as the most dominant material used in global manufacturing. This is obviously true with reusables and assets. And when you're trying to stick an old-fashioned technology that was made for steel or aluminum, and really standards haven't been updated, you're going to be suffering the consequences. When plastic is out and about, it's expanding and contracting. That label, if it's a topical label, is eventually going to fail. So, you know, a lot of the time when we come into the picture, it's because people are desperate. They've invested in us to a track and trace system, and it's not working because this one all-important piece, the QR code be it, is failing. So I think that's an important thing to think about, especially if you're using a polymer reusable.
Absolutely, and I think, like you said, I think you could put reusable packaging on that list to the right as well, because I think what we're seeing is smart reusable packaging being really key in all of this to drive down the cost as well. So you've got your compliance standards in the EU with your PPWR, you've got the EPR in the US, which is sort of saying we need to track and trace the packaging which is being used, but that then allows you also to be able to get information and capability which you wouldn't ordinarily get. So going down to like an item level or a tote level rather than just pallet level, sort of monitoring of what's actually happening to your goods. And we're seeing a lot of that where, again, there's not just technology partners working together, but working with pallet manufacturers, with tote manufacturers, with label manufacturers, in terms of how can you bring all of this together and solve some of the challenges and problems that we see.
Yeah. And we're going to come back to this at the summary, but I just want to point out to people that SystemLoco and Polyfuze are resources in that regard. I mean, if people need help, they can turn to us. We can certainly introduce them to other people in our ecosystem. I think being active in RPA helps us a lot too to have that. So just want to remind people that we are resources for that. Okay, Souroush, let's move forward. I think we have one more slide here. Really what we wanted to do with this slide, Souroush, was before we went on to questions from the audience, we wanted to talk about and highlight some of the real world experience that we've had with manufacturers. I mean, you and I were talking about a bunch of them yesterday. I think I had given an example of a company that had come to us. They specialize in high pressure gas cylinders, so oxygen and helium and things like that. They're using dry ice for transport. It is a reusable that's made of polymer that the cylinders are shipped in. And if those reusables don't come back, they start charging the customer money. So what this company found was they were reaching out to the customer, hey, you know, you owe us our reusable and we're going to start charging. And the customer said, no, we sent it back. It left here a long time ago. And they didn't realize that the reusable had actually come back to their facility, but they had no way of tracking it. So it was really a customer service issue. It wasn't a theft issue. And so in this case, they just wanted a simple QR code that was permanent on the label, on the reusable, so they could keep track of it with the doorway reader as it came in, and they would know, oh, this eliminated a customer service issue. What are some of the other examples? You touched on a little bit ago that example of $500,000 of prime beef. Could you expand on that particular use case?
Sure. I mean, I think as you were saying, it is often the right answer isn't the most complex. I think sometimes you can solve a lot of things through really understanding the problem and looking at, well, what processes and structures could be put in place to manage this. What we've seen though with this example with the food is that, yeah, they had a number of challenges. So one is the right product being placed onto the truck, being able to know that they've got the right pallets on a delivery. If that's wrong, you're ending up delivering the wrong goods, they'll be returned. You've got fees and penalties to pay to a lot of retailers. And then you've got the monitoring of the temperature, which was another challenge for them. So again, being able to have a way that integrates well with their existing workflow, effectively trying to make it as transparent as possible to their existing workflow. So it just adds additional sort of insights that they can then make use of, which they wouldn't have had before, but it's not changing how they do things right now is key. And that includes, for instance, in this case, labeling of the pallets. So there's a label that's printed out with the same process as what they currently use. It's a slightly different label, which has got a BLE in there and temperature sensing. That's then communicating to hubs which can be installed in the vehicles, so they can know that the vehicle that's coming is at the right temperature, where it is it going to arrive on time. They can then see the goods which have been put onto the truck, making sure they're the right ones. And then at that point, you're able to sort of look at that, and this is what our partners do very well, look at that with a lot of external data feeds. So you'll understand the traffic conditions, you understand the weather of where it is now, but also importantly, where it's going. Yes. And then you can use all of that to drive your interventions, which can be manual interventions, but what's happening more and more is these are becoming automated with AI as well, so that they can effectively help to help deliver that intervention at a lower cost. And then finally, I think you've got the fact that then you can look again and sort of see, well, how well is that? What impact did that intervention have? Did it work well? And other things. So there's all of that that sort of brings the whole solution together.
Yep. So Rich, another use case I can't really talk about because it's still in development, but we're working with it's a substantially large pooling company. They have a unique pallet technology. It does involve polymer, obviously, because they're using us. But this is an organization that could really use any type of labeling that they wanted. So they did choose polymer fusion, but instead of RFIDs, they decided to go with QR codes, What's your experience in that? Just the benefit of RFID versus barcodes, or the experience you've had in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, QR codes are great, and I think there's a lot of interesting ways that you can use a QR code. So you can have different permissions based on who scans it and what they see and what information they can access. And I think there's a lot of interactions which are happening with QR codes, which is pretty cool right now. So linking that to a mobile phone that scans it and you can monitor where it is based on the mobile phone, these types of things. RFID is interesting because you've got your RFID, which requires infrastructure. Now we're also seeing a number of BLE tags, both passive and active. So there's companies that provide the very low cost stickers, which can be used in a passive way, but they need to be energized. And there's active stickers as well, which are, again, coming down in price to sub $1 per label, which sounds expensive compared to RFID, but it gives you the benefit of being able to read these with handheld Zebra scanners or hubs that could be in the transit, and also BLE networks, which are terrestrial networks, and in the future satellite networks, which are being put out there to be able to read BLE as well, which is interesting. So there is a big, I mean, technology is moving forwards quite fast. I think that there is always a challenge when people sort of say, what do I choose? And it's moving forward so quickly. What's the right solution for me? But I think the answer is always sort of like to be aware of what's happening and try to have a roadmap to sort of be able to move forwards and improve as technology moves forwards and improves as well.
Well, it goes back to that profound quote at the beginning, right? Selecting the use case before moving forward. I'll emphasize again that you were cautioning, taking it a step at a time. You don't want to create more problems than you solve. I think really beginning at the very start with what your use case is for your organization, what's the budget, what's the goals of the organization. That seems to be a good plan.
Yeah.
So excellent. Souroush, we are just cruising here. This is great. I can't believe a half hour has gone by. We've got some questions that we can go to. I don't see anything yet in the chat. I want to double check, but we do have some frequently asked questions. Let me get one started with SystemLoco. What companies have you worked with in the past, Souroush? Any that you want to call attention to? If anybody asks you, like, who have you worked with in the past?
Sure. So we've worked primarily through our partners. So companies like Overhaul, Cargo Signal, Cargo Sense, these sort of companies that specialize in managing the issues which happen within the supply chain. And through them, the primary market that was served was effectively high value goods and electronics. So collectively, they would do all the big brands when it comes to electronics, from the handset providers to your gaming consoles. Every single one they would be providing solutions for. It expanded, I think, into fashion, where you've got sportswear as well as the high value sort of fashion, where again a lot of it's related to theft. And now we're seeing a lot of expansion now into the pharmaceutical and food market. And although in the past there had been what I would call passive monitoring for pharmaceutical and food, which is something which logs your temperature, is able to tell you at the end of the journey whether it's been out of bounds. Our approach with our partners has been making that into a reactive and preventative sort of solution for monitoring and managing or preventing loss effectively from happening. So rather than being able to just prove at the end of the journey that this food is good for consumption or accepted, it's trying to say, well, if you don't do something now, you could have a problem by the time it arrives. And that's where the focus has been with our partners.
Well, and kind of a follow-up question on that, Souroush. I could understand that if you had a multi-million-dollar shipment of plasma TVs or something like that, you'd want to prevent theft. But have you ever had a situation where someone started out with that and then realized, oh, we were actually more efficient, and they were able to pick up operational efficiencies or customer service issues they solved that that started out with theft in mind? Was there any examples?
Absolutely. We've worked with a large convenience store where initially the problem was theft, and for them I would say it's even more than theft. It was trust. It was goods were going missing from the distribution center to their convenience store. They had a challenge where the convenience store manager would say these weren't packed. They speak to people at the DC. They say, no, we packed them. Someone at your store's taken things out of the totes. You've then got fingers pointing at the driver, and it creates this distrust within their organization. And that was where it started out, was really in terms of trying to look at what's happening in terms of the theft. But then you get like you said, they start to see the operational efficiency benefits. They start saying, well, now we've got a data-driven supply chain. We know that by scanning each one of these totes which have been delivered, we can validate that all the right totes have been delivered to the store because they're traveling together as a group. So it can provide that sort of check, even to the level of integration into their systems. They can then say that this particular tote has been mishandled or has been opened, and that's the one that they go and check rather than having to check every item everywhere. Yeah. So it's again creating efficiency gains. You want your goods on the shelves. You want your people to be focused on customers, not having to manage operational tasks within the store. So
yeah, we had a webinar guest last year. This reminded me that he was talking about when presenting the cost of the system, they were a little bit staggering. Maybe it was in the tens of thousands of dollars, but coming back to them with a return on investment, that when you're able to keep track of where things are and you have access to this data, you can make decisions about things that you didn't know that were even a problem before. So a little bit of experience in that regard, Souroush, where people had access to data before, like what do you do with that data, how to filter that data, or how you're able to help somebody take all that and realize that they picked up some, again, operational efficiency. And
I think that's where AI is really helping a lot of organizations, because they now can do things with data that they couldn't do before easily.
Yeah,
they can start to build out dashboards and really sort of look at creating their own data lake, so they understand all of the movements, all of the challenges, all of the issues, and can start to analyze how they can improve and work on that. And that's certainly a dynamic we're seeing, where people are more and more interested in actually, can I make my supply chain data driven, and can I get the raw data and pull insights from that? Yeah, so we're seeing a trend towards that.
Outstanding. Wow. Souroush, I can't believe we're actually a few minutes past our time, but it's just flown by. It's like that when you're with a friend and it's really interesting content. But anything you want to add in closing here? I mean, you've been a great guest, provided a lot of good information. I hope people that have been listening are seeing the value in it, but anything you want to add in closing?
Well, no, just thank you for having me on, Marty. It's great to be on the show. Yeah, happy for people to contact me. I think my email's on the screen as well. So if there are questions, more than happy for people to get in touch.
Excellent. Now, I want to remind people again that we are resources. If you're thinking about a track and trace system, hopefully this was helpful to you, but we are a resource for you. The Reusable Packaging Association, also, of which Souroush and I are both very connected with, is a good resource as well too. But Souroush, you've been an excellent guest. You're a good friend. Thank you so much. All the best to you and SystemLoco and your family.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Marty.
Cheers. Thank you, everybody.